It seems like every year winter gets longer, but this is what it looks like when spring finally wins. I love spring, and we've got a term that we like to use in the garden center called early spring. What does that mean? Well, early spring isn't necessarily a time frame. It's actually a temperature regimen where you can have some things like what I'm talking about today that'll actually thrive and bloom in those early spring temperatures. Early spring temperatures are really anything that's from about 32 degrees all the way up until we're into the mid to upper 70s for that extended period of time. And in the Midwest, or at least in the Kansas City area, that time frame is normally sometime around the middle of March until the beginning of May. And that's what we like to target as our early spring flower selections. Now, the reason we like to lead up to May is because normally by May, we've actually gotten past the point where we are into our frost-free date, which in Kansas City is around May 10th. And that's when you'd be looking to switch out some of the things that would be considered early spring flowers to permanent or summer-round flowering annuals for your mixed containers, for planting in the landscapes or in the ground. The thing I'm going to talk about today, these 5 annuals are some of my absolute favorites because they add the highest amount of color into your mixed containers. And that's really what we're craving after all winter long of dormancy and gray and drab. These things can add a ton of color and a ton of life to your front door. Let's get into it. Now, there's a lot of other options besides these, things that can add foliage and add texture, but these are some of my absolute favorites for flower color specifically. So number one, I want to start with one of my favorites and one of the fan favorites, the Ranunculus. The Ranunculus bloom has double petals, so it just looks like that perfect rose. It is kind of an iconic symbol of what we like to think of as an early spring container. There's lots of colors to choose from. This pink has been really popular in the most recent years. However, every year it seems to change a little bit. This year, we're already seeing more and more people be drawn to oranges. And so it just changes with each season and what themes are being more relevant. But Ranunculus work really well. They like cooler temperatures, and what they don't like is actually the heat and the humidity. And so as we get into May, they generally stop blooming, and that's a point where you're looking to replace a Ranunculus in a container, or maybe swap out your container entirely for something like one of the summer flowering annuals, things that can tolerate warmer temperatures. But Ranunculus bloom earlier than most and can tolerate temperatures down even into the mid-30s. Not a problem at all. I'd be leaving these outside. If we're at 34, they'll be just fine. It will not hurt them. They prefer it. It actually keeps the buds and the blooms lasting longer by having those cooler temperatures. I really like these in an eastern exposure. Morning sun and afternoon shade is preferred. That gives the bloom the longest lifespan. Although they can handle full sun, it just means they won't bloom as late into the season. They might stop blooming sometime in the end of April rather than in the early or middle of May. But Ranunculus are an amazing option for adding that focal point or that centerpiece to a mixed container. In addition to Ranunculus, we've got stock. Stock is an amazing plant that has so much spring fragrance. And the way that we grow them is we multi-sow them in a container so that you've got at least 3 plants in a pot. And so oftentimes they'll come in with mixed colors. Now the seeds are random, so some pots will have all purple. They'll have purple, white, and pink. Some will have pinks. Some will have single flowers and double flowers, and some will be all double flowers because it's an assorted seed mix that we use, and really love adding these into the container. Again, for a vertical element to give it some height, but also to give it some amazing spring fragrance. Stock are very similar to Ranunculus in that they bloom when it's cool out, and when it starts to get warmer, they'll actually decrease their bloom count. And ultimately, this is meant to be an early spring plant where temperatures are really staying below the mid-70s. That's when stock and Ranunculus are really going to thrive and do the best. Now, in addition to your centerpieces or things that are going to give you that vertical height for flowers, you also have things that would be fillers or things that would kind of intermix inside the container. And Nemesia is a really good example of that. And again, it's one of those plants that's not going to make it all summer long, and that's not the intent of this. The intent for early spring is to get you a lot of color at the earliest point in the season where things can tolerate cooler temperatures. And those cooler temperatures, again, being down into the mid-30s, not a problem for the Nemesias. The great thing about Nemesias is that they intermix inside of a container really, really well. And there's a lot of colors to choose from. So we've got yellows to choose from, different tones of pinks. They come in white, purples, and even some bicolors. So Nemesia works well because it intermixes and interplays really nicely with some of the other vertical elements like the Ranunculus and the stock. These containers are great because you can use Nemesia to complement or to contrast. So in this container, we've got kind of a monochromatic theme where you've got the pink Nemesia, pink Ranunculus, and pink pansy mix, where you've got a higher contrast in this one. And it works really well because it's utilized so many different ways in mixed containers. But again, the thing I like about early spring flowering options is that you can get a ton of color. And that's not to dismiss anything about the foliage or the texture of some of the cabbages, the kales, some of the grasses that work really well for early season, because they're also great options. But this is how you can get the most amount of colors by adding these types of things to your containers. Now, an early spring container wouldn't be the same without pansies. And you can see in this one, it's got a really nice pansy mix. The pansies are the most durable out of any of the early spring annuals. Oftentimes, pansies are actually planted in the fall, especially in the Midwest and Kansas City. They will make it through the winter, no problem. Now, if you plant them in the fall, September, October, they'll bloom all fall long. They'll look like they've gone dormant through the wintertime, but ultimately the spring temperatures warm up, and right about now, they're starting to bloom all over town, those pansies that were planted in the fall. And that is really specific to things that are planted in the ground. If they're planted into a container, there is no guarantee that they'll make it through the winter. So this is where you can bring in your containers and plant them up for spring by adding a flat or two of pansies to really fill it out and make you get that pop of color near your front door, where the ground planted pansies will absolutely come back. One of the most popular mixes this time of year is the clear mix. These pansies come 12 in a tray. There's 3 seeds in a pot. And so you're getting 36 individual plants in here with just an array of colors that can absolutely make your front door pop. You can put these in containers in the ground. They're just durable. Even below freezing, they will make it. It might shatter some of the blooms if we're sequential days below the 30s, but they will rebloom and they will thrive because they're one of those plants that absolutely loves the cooler temperatures. Besides the pansies and the Nemesia as kind of fillers, there's also some flowering options that will do really great by trailing over the side of the pot. Things that I really like to use are Lobularia, also known as Alyssum. Now there's seed varieties of Alyssum. They're going to stay a little more compact. And then there's the vegetative types of Alyssum or Lobularia, and these will trail over the sides of some of the containers. This works great because not only are they fragrant, they also are very vigorous. So they will fill, they'll trail, and they'll spill over those sides, making the combination look absolutely amazing. This is a great example of a mixed container where you've got pansies, Nemesia, and then trailing over the side is that Alyssum. It's a great combination plant. They can be used in the ground or in combos, but this kind of gives you a complete look at how you can add 5 of these annuals, make an amazing arrangement, get fragrance, color, and beauty added to your front porch or to your landscape in the early spring, knowing that those temperatures are the mid 30s all the way up to the mid 70s. These things will absolutely thrive and bloom nonstop. Enjoy early spring. Instead of being dormant, add some color to your front door and give your life some living color. Hey, if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. That will help push it out to others. And if you want to see more content like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll never miss an update. Thanks for spending time with us.